This story happened in December of 2019. I was a junior in college, attending a school in rural Minnesota. If you know anything about Minnesota winters, you know that the highways can turn into death traps in a matter of minutes. I was driving back home to Wisconsin for winter break. It was supposed to be a 5-hour drive, but a massive blizzard hit about halfway through. The visibility got so bad that I couldn't see the hood of my own car. I was gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were white, going maybe 15 miles per hour on the interstate. Eventually, the radio announced that the highway ahead was being closed due to a pileup. I had no choice but to pull off at the next exit. It wasn't really a town. It was just a gas station that had closed for the night and a small, unlit rest area parking lot across the street. The gas station lights were off. The pumps were dark. The only light came from a single flickering street lamp in the rest area. It was 1 a.m. My phone had about 12% battery left, and of course, no service because of the storm. I decided I'd just have to sleep in the car until the plows came through in the morning. I kept the engine running to keep the heat on, cracking the window a tiny bit to prevent carbon monoxide poisoning, just like my dad always taught me. There was only one other vehicle in the lot. It was an old, beat-up, dark blue van parked way in the back corner. It was completely covered in snow, looking like it had been sitting there for days. I assumed it was abandoned. I reclined my seat and threw my jacket over me as a blanket. I drifted off for a while, but I'm a light sleeper. I woke up at 3:14 a.m. I remembered the time because the glowing dashboard clock was the only thing I could see. I didn't know what woke me up at first. The wind was still howling outside, shaking the car gently. But then I heard it. Footsteps. I froze. I slowly lifted my head, just enough to peek into the rear view mirror. In the red glow of my taillights, I saw a silhouette. A man was standing directly behind my car. He wasn't doing anything. He was just standing there, facing my rear bumper, perfectly still. My heart started hammering against my ribs. I slowly reached for the lock button on the door to make sure it was engaged. Click. The sound was quiet, but in the silence of the night, it was loud enough. The man's head snapped up. He heard it. He slowly walked around the side of the car to my driver's side window. I tried to look as menacing as possible, but I was a terrified 20-year-old kid. He tapped on the glass. Tap, tap. I rolled the window down, maybe an inch. The freezing wind hissed into the car. "Yeah?" I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The guy was wearing a heavy parka with a fur hood pulled low. I couldn't see his eyes, just a scruffy beard. "My van died," he mumbled. "Need a jump. Cables are in the back." He pointed the gloved thumb toward the dark blue van in the corner. Now, usually I'm a helpful guy, but something felt wrong. The van was covered in snow. If he had just broken down, there would be tracks leading to it. or the snow would be melted on the hood from the engine heat. I can't, I said. I don't have cables. I have cables, he insisted, stepping closer. He put his hand on the top of my window glass. Just need you to pull your car over there. I'm not moving the car, I said. I'm low on gas. The man stood there for a long, uncomfortable moment. Then he leaned in, putting his face right next to the crack in the window. You really gonna leave me to freeze out here? His tone had changed. It wasn't pleading anymore. It was aggressive. I'm sorry, I said, and I started to roll up the window. He jammed his fingers into the gap, trying to stop the glass from rising. Hey, open the door, he shouted. I panicked. I slammed the car into drive. My tires spun on the ice for a second, screeching, before they caught traction. The guy had to yank his hand back to avoid getting dragged. I fishtailed out of the parking spot and aimed for the exit ramp. As I sped past the abandoned blue van in the corner, my headlights swept across it. My blood ran cold. The windshield of the van wasn't covered in snow. It was wiped clean. And sitting in the driver's seat of the dead van was another man. He was wide awake, staring right at me, his hands on the steering wheel, and the engine was puffing exhaust into the cold air. The van wasn't dead. It wasn't abandoned. They were waiting. The guy outside had tried to lure me over there, to corner me. I didn't stop driving. I drove 10 miles on unplowed roads, sliding all over the place, until I found a 24-hour truck stop. I ran inside and called the state troopers. When the troopers went back to the rest stop about an hour later, the van was gone. But they checked the security footage from the gas station across the street. The footage showed that the van had pulled into the lot just 10 minutes after I did. They sat there in the dark for 2 hours, watching me sleep, before the one guy got out to try and lure me out of my car. The scariest part? The police said that based on the tracks in the snow, the second guy, the driver in the van, had actually gotten out while I was talking to the first guy, waiting for me to unlock the doors or get out to help. If I had agreed to give them a jump, I might never have made it back into my car. This happened about 3 years ago, during that really bad cold snap that hit the Midwest. I was 22 at the time, still living with my parents in a suburb just outside of Minneapolis. My parents had decided to go down to Florida for 2 weeks to escape the brutal cold, which meant I had the entire house to myself. Our house wasn't in the middle of nowhere, but it was on a cul-de-sac that backed right up to a dense patch of woods. In the summer, it was nice. In the winter, when the trees were bare and the snow was piled 4 feet high, it felt pretty desolate. It was a Tuesday night, and the forecast was calling for a historic blizzard. Temperatures were supposed to drop to 20 below zero, with wind chills that could literally kill you in minutes. By 6 p.m., the snow was already coming down so hard You couldn't see the house across the street. I decided to just hunker down, order a pizza before the roads closed, and binge watch some shows. Around 9 p.m, the pizza guy barely made it up the driveway. I tipped him $20 just for the effort, locked the front door, and settled onto the couch in the living room. The layout of our house is important for this. The living room has these massive floor-to-ceiling windows that look directly out into the backyard and the woods. During the day, it's a great view. At night, when the lights are on inside, the windows just turn into black mirrors. You can't see out, but anyone outside has a perfect view of you. Around 11:30 p.m, the wind was howling so loud it shook the window frames. I was just about to head upstairs to bed when I heard a noise over the sound of the storm. It was a sharp thud coming from the back deck. I froze. My first thought was that a heavy branch had snapped under the weight of the snow and hit the deck. I walked over to the sliding glass door and cupped my hands against the glass to see out. I couldn't see anything except swirling white snow. The motion sensor floodlight that usually lights up the yard wasn't triggering. I figured the bulb had blown out from the cold. I double-checked the lock on the slider. It was secure, and convinced myself it was just the weather. I turned off the living room lights and went upstairs to my bedroom, which faced the street. I fell asleep pretty quickly, but I woke up abruptly at 2 a.m. I didn't know what woke me up at first. The house was dead silent. The wind had died down, but the cold had settled in. I could hear the house creaking as the temperature dropped. Then I heard it. Crunch, crunch, crunch. It was the distinct sound of footsteps in deep, frozen snow, and it was coming from directly under my bedroom window. My heart instantly started pounding. I slowly got out of bed and crept to the window. I peeked through the blinds, looking down at the front yard. The streetlights were illuminating the snow perfectly. There, right in the middle of my front lawn, was a set of fresh footprints. But they weren't walking down the sidewalk. They had come from the backyard, walked around the side of the house, and stopped right under my window. I grabbed my phone to call 911, but as soon as I looked at the screen, I saw no service. The storm must have knocked out a cell tower nearby. I checked the Wi-Fi. Down. The landline was downstairs in the kitchen. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept under my bed and opened my bedroom door. The hallway was pitch black. I slowly walked down the stairs, trying to avoid the squeaky steps I'd known since childhood. When I got to the bottom of the stairs, I had a clear view of the kitchen and the back sliding glass door. My stomach dropped. The sliding glass door was wide open. Snow was blowing into the kitchen, piling up on the tile floor. The temperature in the room was freezing. I stood there, paralyzed. I knew I had locked that door, I had checked it specifically. That's when I noticed the wet boot prints on the kitchen tile. They led from the open door, through the kitchen, and disappeared around the corner into the living room. Someone was inside the house. I gripped the bat so hard my knuckles turned white. I didn't know if I should run out the front door or hide. If I ran outside, it was 20 below zero. I was in boxers and a t-shirt. I'd freeze to death before I reached a neighbour. I decided to hide. There was a small coat closet right at the bottom of the stairs. I stepped inside and pulled the door almost shut, leaving a tiny crack to see through. I stood there in the dark, shivering from the cold air flooding the house, listening. For 5 minutes, silence. Then, I heard a sound that made my skin crawl. It was the sound of the TV turning on in the living room. Static. Then the volume went up. It was just the local news weather report, playing loudly. Then, I saw him. A man walked past the closet door, moving from the living room back toward the kitchen. He was huge. He was wearing a thick, dirty parka and heavy snow boots. He wasn't rushing. He was moving casually, like he lived there. He walked into the kitchen and stood in front of the open sliding door. He just stood there, letting the blizzard blow into the house. Then, he spoke. He didn't yell. He just said, in a calm, flat voice, "I know you're cold. You should come sit by the fire." He knew I was there. He wasn't looking for money. He wasn't looking for electronics. He was looking for me. I stopped breathing. I watched as he reached into his pocket and pulled out something metallic. It wasn't a gun. It looked like a long, serrated hunting knife. He turned around and started walking toward the stairs, toward where I had been sleeping. As soon as he put his foot on the first step, passing the closet I was hiding in, I made my move. I burst out of the closet, slammed the bat into the back of his knees as hard as I could, and sprinted for the open back door. He roared in pain and fell, but I didn't look back. I ran out the sliding door into the snow. The shock of the cold hit me like a physical punch. The snow was up to my knees. I had no shoes on. I scrambled around the side of the house, heading for the garage side door. I punched the keypad code with frozen fingers. The door clicked open. I threw myself inside and hit the button to close the garage door, just as I saw the man limp around the corner of the house, the knife glinting in the moonlight. The garage door slammed shut. I locked the side door and scrambled into my dad's truck. I locked the truck doors and laid on the horn, just holding it down. I sat there for what felt like an hour, shivering violently, honking the horn, watching the door handle to the house jiggle as he tried to get into the garage. Eventually, the jiggling stopped. I saw blue lights flash through the garage windows about 20 minutes later. A neighbour had heard the continuous honking and called the cops. When the police entered the house, the back door was still wide open. The snow in the kitchen hadn't melted because the house was so cold. They didn't find the man. He had fled into the woods as soon as he heard the sirens. But here is the part that genuinely traumatized me. When the police searched the house, they found my winter boots sitting in the middle of the living room floor. They were wet. The police determined that the man had actually been living in our crawl space for at least 2 days before the storm hit. He had been coming up into the house while I was asleep or watching TV, using my shower, eating our food, and even wearing my boots to go outside and pace around the yard. The thud I heard earlier that night wasn't a tree branch. It was him forcing the lock on the crawl space hatch to get fully into the house. The scariest part was what they found on the kitchen table. He had laid out 2 place settings, 2 plates, 2 forks, 2 knives, and in the center of the table, he had placed my driver's license, which he had taken out of my wallet while I was sleeping upstairs. They never caught him. To this day, whenever it snows, I check every single lock in the house 3 times before I can go to sleep. And I never, ever look out the windows at night.